But, you know, I can honestly say that in my career, I've learned the most in the shortest amount of time by sitting next to people who had way more talent than me and just watching them work. Right. And so that's what I love about that video is it just kind of like he invites you in and it's like you're looking over his shoulder and you're watching him work. I mean, I can tell you how to do things, but until you actually see it or you do it yourself, you're not going to learn how these things operate. Right. So beyond the idea of creating a logo, just the way that he was working, I think is really important because you need to keep track of everything that you do. And so you notice how he didn't just have one thing on the middle of his screen and he plugged away on it for 5 minutes. Every time he wanted to make a change to it, he'd make a copy of it, move it to the side and make the change to the copy. And then he'd make a copy of that, move it to the side, make the next change to that copy. And so that's how he operates. And all of you are going to figure out ways that work for you. If you're working in Illustrator, you can do stuff like that. Like I saw him give a talk in Toronto and he brought in one of his Illustrator files and put it up on the screen. And he zoomed out, like you've got your page size, which is your artboard, but you can zoom out and you've got this whole other area that you can have for your file, right? And he literally had like 200 or 300 different versions of this one logo that he was working on, right? And that's just him doing small, minute changes, but he records everything and he has it all in there. If you prefer to work, and you can have layers in Illustrator, but if you prefer like Photoshop or software that is a bit more intuitive when it comes to creating layers more naturally, maybe you work in one spot, but you just keep like duplicating layers and making changes to those layers. And then you hide the ones that are in behind, and you just keep working on the next layer forward. And you've got all of those layers in one file that you can go in and you can activate or you can turn on or turn off to look at them later. Or maybe you do like a save as, and you say save as version 1.1, version 1.2, version 1.3, version 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, you know, that kind of thing. Whatever works for you. What's important is that you document it all, because this is how we make a living. Okay, this is what we're paid for. It's a fight in the arts. I'm going to be honest with you, and maybe you've already experienced this yourself. It's a fight in the arts to justify the prices that we charge for what we do. How many times have you had people approach you and say, hey, you can draw. Why don't you just do this thing for me? Right? Or, hey, could you slap something together for me? You know, and like, it's no big deal, right? Like it doesn't take an enormous amount of talent on your part to do that. Right. And if you do create something amazing, they're like, what would you charge for something like that? And then they're blown away when you tell them, you know, that you would have 3 or 4 figures in your price. Right. And they're like, what? I can't pay you that for, like, that's just something you did in no time. Like, yeah, because I'm talented. Right. So you have to be able to justify the work that you do by being able to show the work, right? And so let me give you a for instance. This is something that is a very real thing that we struggle with in design. The Sheridan logo. Okay, you know the Sheridan logo, it's just a word mark, the word Sheridan. It's got a stylized S that's kind of half serif, half sans serif. Sheridan paid $2 million for that logo. And I know I even said it that way because I wanted you to have a reaction like, what? They paid $2 million for a word mark and for a stylized S that I don't even really like that much. Like, what are you talking about? Right. And I am never going to be upset when I hear about good creative being paid good money, because you know what that $2 million paid for? That paid for a studio of about 40 people who worked 2 years on that project. It paid for their salaries and their benefits. And not only wasn't just a logo, it was an entire branding system where that studio worked out every single application of that logo on every single type of device, whether it was print or interactive, and accompanied with it different color schemes and different patterns that went with it, and provided one holistic package to Sheridan where everything was thought about from the beginning. Right. And so when you break it down and you look at it, it isn't actually all that much money. If it paid that many people's salary for 2 years, right, it's not really, it doesn't end up working out to be all that much. Right. I can say that I've designed logos in my career. I've charged a case of beer to a friend for a logo, and I've charged $10,000 to an insurance company, right, for a logo that I did for them. Now, again, you might be like, $10,000 for a logo, but let me break it down. That project, again, was a branding, wasn't just a logo. It was all the applications of that logo over multiple different areas. And it was also 6 months of my life. So $10,000 over 6 months, that's not a living wage, right? So it wasn't the only thing that I worked on. I had other clients that I was working on at the same time. I had other projects from the same client that I was working on at the same time, but it was one project. And I can say that I charged $10,000 for that logo, right? And so you have to show context, like Aaron was saying. You have to be able to contextualize the work that you do and show the process, because over that 10 months, there was months of back and forth with the client of showing them lots of different concepts before we narrowed in on what the final was going to be. And that's what they're paying for, right? That's what when they cut that check, they want to know what they're paying for. It's not just the final thing. And so with this assignment, we're doing something now that's 6 weeks in the making. And in the end, you're going to have a really simple animal on top of a letter. It's going to be a really simple, probably the most simplest thing that you're going to design all year, right? But I'm giving you the most time to work on it, because I want you to be able to document everything that you do. And I want you to learn that simple isn't always simpler. And there's a process to get to it, right? And so when you hear about artists making good money for good work, you have to be able to defend it, because this is what you're going to do for the rest of your life. If you want to sell yourself, if you want to sell your work, you have to be able to sell it. You have to be able to sell yourself, and you have to be able to sell the work. Okay. So don't buy into this very kind of, conservative approach to like, what they paid, how much for what? That's the stupidest thing I ever heard. They're just throwing their money. Don't buy into that. Right? Good people making good money, doing good work. And you understand where that comes from. Okay. So, but you have to, and so this is why I do it. I'm not sadistic. I'm not making you save all these different versions because I like to see you suffer. I want you to get in the habit of doing it. But this is the only project I'm going to do this on. From project 3 forward for the rest of the year, it's going to be incumbent upon you to document your own process. And I'm not going to say every week, this is what I want to see. We're going to have a few weeks for every project, and you're going to have to figure out how much work you need to do from one week to the next, right? And everybody's different. Some people are going to do 100 thumbnails and some people are going to do 3 thumbnails, but whatever it takes for you to do the job properly, right? So that's how you're going to separate yourself from everybody else out there who can buy the software and can slap a font down onto a page with next to an illustration, right? How do you separate yourself from that? You're going to put in the work, right? And you can't shy away from putting in the work. So that's why we do this. Okay. And that's why it seems like, and maybe for homework in the past week, you were doing like 1,000 things, or maybe you were like, I don't know what Todd wants me to do. I'm just going to, I'll just go to class next week and figure out, what I need to catch up on. Right. I get it, but you have to push yourself. You have to find it in you to see how far you can push your ideas and before, so you don't just settle in on something too quickly. And that's what we're doing. This is a process. I don't expect you to get it right away. And that's why on this first big project, we're taking a long time to do this and to get to the final result. Okay. So,
Todd, I have a question.
Absolutely.
Sorry, are we recording this last
part?
This
is actually being recorded. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, great. Because I think it's very, very important what you just said. And I just wanted to make sure that it is recorded, because I was trying to write it down, but I'm not fast enough.
Absolutely.